What is going on, everyone? This is Eric coming at you from just outside of Hartford, Connecticut. And today, we're going to be discussing a few reasons why I hate each team in the NL Central. This is actually our last baseball rant. I hope you guys enjoyed the baseball rants. The playlist is up. Definitely check it out if you want to see why I hate your particular MLB team, unless you're a Phillies fan, in which case, you don't have a rant yet. Anyways, we're going to start off with the Chicago Cubs. Now, reason one, the Steve Bartman incident. Now, I wasn't watching this game when it happened, but I do remember the highlights. I do remember watching the media afterthoughts with ESPN and stuff covering it like crazy. And right from the beginning, I don't necessarily think that the fielder would have gotten to the ball. I don't think he was going to get the ball. He might have been close, but I think the way the wall was positioned and everything, I don't think he could have gotten to the baseball. So I don't necessarily blame Bartman, but my problem with the Bartman incident as a whole is one thing we'll get to in a second, and the fact that the media just blew it out of proportion, big time. Like, it's, oh yeah, the Cubs are cursed. No, just stop, please. The next reason is the Cubs fans, their treatment of Bartman. Now, he received multiple death threats. He had to be escorted out of the stadium. Everyone in Chicago knew who he was. Everyone in Chicago wanted him. You know, they wanted to get revenge. Well, guys, here's my problem with that. The Cubs had multiple chances to win not only that game, but then there was a game 7 too in that 2003 NLCS. It's not like it was just that was the series deciding game. No, you still had one other game. You were at home game 7. You blew it. That's on you. I don't know why people took it out on Bartman. I mean, I get it, but I don't at the same time. Next is how the fans are the quote-unquote lovable losers. I never liked that because, you know, the Cubs, I mean, yeah, I get it. A long, long time ago, they were a bunch of, their fans, I should say, weren't necessarily the most popular. The team wasn't the most popular. But fact of the matter is you're still in a big market, and you are the better team in the big market, at least according to most people. But, I never understood why they called themselves the lovable losers. I do, but I don't. It doesn't make any sense to me. Next is them overshadowing the White Sox. Now, if I had to pick an AL team, it would be close, but I always rotate, and I do like some of the players that the White Sox have, so it would probably be the White Sox. But even now, you know, it just kind of disgusts me that the White Sox get all, completely ignored, for lack of a better word. It's kind of mind-boggling at this point how they're just treated. Nobody even cares about the White Sox. There are multiple other cities that would love to have an MLB team, and Chicago definitely is not a city that can support two teams. LA can, and New York can. If anyone else should, maybe Philadelphia, but I wouldn't even want one. Maybe Boston, but they wouldn't want one. So, no. Chicago doesn't need two teams, and it's shown just by how the media completely ignores the White Sox. Lastly, we have the 2016 World Series. Don't get me wrong, I was happy when the Cubs broke the curse, but I was rooting for Cleveland just because of their former owner, Bill Veeck. And, you know, it's always kind of fun. The Cubs curse had been going on for almost a century at that point. So it's like, all right, or over a century actually. But, you know, I was just rooting for Cleveland to break their curse, partly because of the movie Major Leagues. Next, we have the Cincinnati Reds. First point is Nicholas Castellanos' 2021 home runs. Every time Castellanos hit a homer, something bad would happen shortly thereafter. At first, it was kind of cool. It was kind of like, oh, that's ironic. But then it just constantly became into, it just, after the first couple times, it became annoying. And it's like, all right, the media and all the fans, I should say, are just reaching for the dumbest things. It became a hassle. Mascot, Mr. Redlegs. That mascot looks like Mr. Met, the Mets mascot, obviously, but creepier. I never liked this mascot. He's weird looking. He's creepy looking. He's just like a nightmare. If you're a kid and you see Mr. Redlegs, you're freaked out. Manager, Pete Rose. Don't get me wrong. Pete Rose as a player is the MLB hit king. No denying that. But once he became the manager of the Reds, that's when he started betting on baseball. Now, I'm not here to speculate if he bet on the Reds or not. I'm not here to do that. Or if he bet against the Reds, I should say. But regardless, when he became the manager, He bet on baseball. That's a violation of the rules. Banned him for life. Unfortunately, the Phillies miss out on a Hall of Famer because he did that. And that's something that's on the Reds. They're the ones who hired him to be manager. First player manager, then manager, but that's on them. Failing to get Ken Griffey Jr. a ring. Now, Ken Griffey Jr. was traded away to Cincinnati because he wanted to be closer to home. But, the problem with that is they had a good chance to get a ring. Seattle failed Ken Griffey Jr. for over a decade. Cincinnati should have done it. They failed miserably. And then Ken Griffey Jr. walked. Can't blame him. Or was traded, actually. But regardless, they failed to get him a ring. It's a shame. He's one of the better players in MLB history that didn't get a ring. Didn't get a ring in general. It's sad. It's really sad, actually. And then you have their hats. You might be thinking, wait, what? Why am I complaining about their hats? Simply put, they're ugly. They're so plain, so boring. Like, get some more creativity than just a letter C. Just a plain letter C. And I know I'm hypocritical. The Phillies had a P for their hats, but the Cubs, it's just like the Phillies hat except a C instead of a P. And at least the Phillies hat has a little bit more of a design to it, I guess. Next, you have the Milwaukee Brewers screwing over the city of Seattle. Now, someone like me who's got the historical mindset, and obviously I love the history of series, when I found out about the Seattle Pilots, I was like, oh, okay. But the way the Major League system did it was they completely screwed over Seattle. They made it so they weren't ready. And then what ended up happening is former Commissioner Bud Selig ended up getting the team, brought him over to Milwaukee, and they became the Brewers. But the city of Seattle just completely got screwed over by that whole situation. They were rushed into existence, and then they were out as quickly as they began. It was just a pathetic thing. Honestly, the team, it's not necessarily the Brewers that did it, but just the fact that they're the history, they screwed over Seattle. Then you have losing to Atlanta in the 2021 playoffs. This would be a bullet point regardless. This is obviously a recency bias, but you're one of the teams that should have beaten Atlanta in the playoffs and you blew it. So that's a knock on you. Lastly, nickname of Brewers. I get it. You're paying homage. There was a team that had the same name in the early 1900s. I think they only spent a couple years in Milwaukee. I could be wrong on that. But I don't like the nickname of Brewers. It's boring. It's bland. I'm reaching, but there's not much to say about Milwaukee. They're so neutral. No one can hate Milwaukee. Then you have the Pittsburgh Pirates. Chris Archer. I'm not a fan of Chris Archer. I never was a fan of Chris Archer. He burned me in my fantasy baseball leagues 2 years. I don't remember the exact 2 years, but if you look at his records, it's the year where he had 20-plus losses, and then 2 or 3 years after that, he just completely burned me both times, so he immediately became a player I didn't like. And then he went to the Pirates. I don't care for the Pirates, and the move at the time made no sense to me. So I'm just kind of like, all right, whatever. Why are you doing this? Chris Archer isn't a good fit with your team. But then you get the Chris Archer trade. So like I said, the move made no sense. So the move in general, the Pirates were trending as, okay, maybe they have a year left. But realistically, they should be focusing on rebuilding. They're not a World Series contender. They're far from a World Series contender. So, are they really going to trade all these assets to get an aging pitcher? A pitcher who I'm not a big fan of to begin with. And then you look at who they gave up. Obviously, Shane Baz, one of the best prospects in the league. He made his debut, but, there's him. And then you got a couple other players. Of course, Austin Meadows and the other pitcher, Glasnow. So it's just kind of mind-boggling that you gave up 3 potential superstars. That trade's just going to continue to get worse and worse for Pittsburgh. I'm not a hater of the Rays, but I don't know. I'm kind of happy that this trade happened, but at the same time, no. Inability to become relevant again. So, like I kind of mentioned, the Chris Archer trade was kind of like Pittsburgh's attempt to become relevant. It failed. It backfired. Pittsburgh just hasn't been relevant for over a decade, it seems, at this point. I honestly can't tell you the last time Pittsburgh was relevant. And obviously they were good in the early 2010s, but when have they really been a World Series contender? I don't think they've been a legitimate World Series contender in my lifetime. Lastly, their historic rivalry with the Phillies. So I have no beef with them. When I look at the Pirates, I'm not like, oh, I hate those guys. But, they just have a historic rivalry with the Phillies just because they're from the same state. They both played in the NL East for a long time, 80-plus years. I don't remember exactly when the divisions realigned. I think it was in the 70s. And I know these two teams were together actually in the 1880s, so a while. But, these two teams, they hated each other for the longest time. Lastly, we have the St. Louis Cardinals, 2011 NLDS. I remember watching that game. And I'm showing the next 2 points here because this ended the Phillies mini dynasty. I remember watching the game. I remember Howard struck the ball. You see him go to run. All of a sudden he falls on the ground and he's easily thrown out. Cardinals start celebrating. And I just remember the pictures. You see the Cardinals celebrating and Ryan Howard sitting there on the ground holding his foot with the medical staff there. It still hurts me to this day to watch that. And that essentially was the end of the Phillies dynasty. Then Howard's horrible, atrocious contract kicked in, and he was nowhere near the player he was pre-Achilles injury. Regardless, this is definitely a reason I don't like the Cardinals, because whenever I think of the Cardinals, I'm reminded of this particular moment, and it just hurts. Even though it was a decade ago, I still remember it. The Curt Flood saga. Oh, talk about free agency. All right, so free agency literally began because of this move, where the Cardinals traded Curt Flood to the Phillies in 1970, and then he just refused to sign with the Phillies. Turned into this whole thing with a lawsuit and everything. Phillies got completely screwed over in the whole situation. And it's just something that, again, I associate with the Cardinals. And you can see, here I am, my top moments here are all because of stuff with the Phillies and the Cardinals. So, Curt Flood saga, good for baseball players, all things considered, bad for the Phillies. Then you get beating out Bill Veeck's Browns. So the Browns and the Cardinals had a historic rivalry back in the day in St. Louis, and Bill Veeck tried to get the Browns out of St. Louis. He tried his best, but then the Busch Beer Company ended up coming in, and they bought the Cardinals, and then with that, Bill Veeck had no chance. Veeck was one of the last, single owners that didn't have a huge source of income other than his team. So when the Busch Brewing Company, I guess, bought the Cardinals, it became clear that the Browns are done, which is a shame. Lastly, we have Tony La Russa. Tony La Russa is one of the most controversial managers in recent baseball history. And he's just a guy that you either love him or you hate him. And if you're not a fan of the team he's currently coaching, you probably hate him. So next we have the one good thing I say about each team. We will start with the Cardinals. It's kind of tough, but you have two of my favorite players. You have Goldschmidt and Arenado. I like both of them. I prefer Goldschmidt to Arenado if I had to choose one, but he's nearing the end of his career. I'd like to see him potentially get a chance to compete for a ring. Then you have the Pittsburgh Pirates. I don't know if I've mentioned it in a video before, but when they won the 1971 World Series, the player who actually hit the series-winning run, the series-clinching run, it put them up 2-0, and then the Orioles ended up scoring a run later in that half inning, but regardless, that player who hit that run, his name is Jose Pagan. I actually worked with his grandson, so it was kind of cool. Then you have the Milwaukee Brewers. All right, real talk here. Well, I don't think... I would have loved to see Zach Wheeler win the 2021 NL Cy Young. Corbin Burns deserved it. I'm a fan of Corbin Burns. I like what he does. I like what he brings to the table. I'm also a fan of Brandon Woodruff. Cincinnati Reds. So, I do like Nick Castellanos a good amount. He is one of my favorite players. I know he's a pending free agent, but him alone, he helps you out. And I also like Nick Senzel, although he's been a bust. Lastly, we have the Chicago Cubs. Honestly, for the Cubs, I mean... There's not a lot of positive things I can really think of for the Cubs, other than specific players that I've liked. You had Anthony Rizzo, and you had Chris Bryant. I like those guys. Anyway, this was the NL Central Rant. I hope you guys enjoyed this. This is unfortunately the end of our baseball rant series. I may go down in the future and potentially do other types of rants, but this was it for teams. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Have a good rest of your day.